Good evening. This is Dr. Klein coming to you from Raleigh, North Carolina. A lot of you have been asking where I was. I was taking a little vacation with the family. It is growing worse, even though the big Ruan, R-U-A-N, Supreme Court decision has basically freed doctors locked up for drug trafficking when they were not drug trafficking. 9 months later, they're still in prison. Seems like the government's dragging their feet with the paperwork to let them out. The Ruan Supreme Court decision was 9-0, and it basically said doctors were being imprisoned unfairly with trumped up charges of such things as overprescribing. Now, do we remember where overprescribing came from? Yes, it came from the director of the CDC, Thomas Frieden, who in a speech on the day of the release of the guidelines 2016, on March 15th, said that doctors were responsible for the opioid epidemic by overprescribing. There had really been no articles published on overprescribing until he made that statement. And then it went from 75 articles over a 6-year period to 2,100 articles, or 1,200, over a period of 7 years. So Dr. Frieden really kind of started this, and then he slipped out of the CDC without explaining, is it true that doctors have caused the epidemic? I think it's time we talk about what the epidemic is, as defined by the CDC, since nobody else is defining the epidemic. What it was an increase in 1 person per 100,000 in deaths. So it went from 9 per 100,000 to 10 per 100,000. They claimed that was a 10% increase. No. You can't do that with statistics. 1 person per 100,000. Is that a lot? Well, for example, there's 300 or 400 people per 1,000 who are dying from tobacco and alcohol. So those are the real numbers, 300 to 400 people per 1,000, not 1 person. That is a dishonest declaration of an epidemic. So if doctors cause the epidemic and there isn't an epidemic, what kind of logic do we have there? I'm going to try to keep these to 10 minutes, and I have a little timer here, which I'll be looking at. You'll see me looking down. And sometimes we'll do little brief ones, and I will announce that at the beginning if we're just doing a 2 or 3 minute one. But today we want to talk about something that's real important. It's about tolerance. So the PrOP, that's the Physicians for Opioid Prescribing, who are the only group in the United States pushing for restrictions of opiate pain medicines, the only group, and there's 17 doctors. Not a large group, but they're very effective. And one of their doctrine is the assumption that because drugs cause tolerance, you have to take more and more and more. And if you take more and more, you're more likely to become addicted. So we need to take a look at that from the standpoint of logic and our old friend Socrates. Now, Socrates taught us how to use logic, how to think. So here's the story. The FDA, if you look up any one of the opiates, says these drugs can cause tolerance. In other words, that's to be expected. So what is tolerance? You have an amazing organ in your body called the liver. The liver's job is to detect foreign chemicals and figure out a way to get rid of them. That protects you against poisoning. Sometimes the liver is overwhelmed and you die from the poison, but most of the time, especially with medications, the liver does an analysis on the substance and then figures out a way to get rid of it. It either gets rid of it through the bile down the gastrointestinal tract or out the urine. In the case of opiates, it's figured out a way to get it down out of your body through the urine. Now, so if you take an opiate, let's say you take a certain dose and you have a blood level of 50, and those are obtainable. So it's working fine, you're functioning, you're going back to work, you're driving your car again, you're making love again, everything is good. And all of a sudden, like a month later, you notice the pain's coming back. So if you did a blood level, you would find out it's less because your liver is getting rid of the opiate pain medicine. Not that you want it to, after all, but it just does it anyway without asking you. So that's what tolerance is. Tolerance is really lowering the blood level because your liver is kicking stuff out of your body. So the answer is you increase the milligrams of opiate you put in your mouth. Then your blood level goes back up to 50, back to functioning again, back to sleeping normally, back to the point that it's not killing you to ride around in the car. And so you've just really put the blood level back to its original level. But people that distort the logic will say, you're taking more and more pills. You are, that's correct, you're taking more milligrams. But the real way medicines work is not how many milligrams you put in your mouth, it's how many milligrams end up in your bloodstream. Lots of drugs have blood levels that you can check and be sure that the drug is effective. Sometimes, like with antibiotics, you're not sure if it's effective. You get a blood level and you kind of know that a blood level should be, let's say, 100, and you're given the antibiotic and lo and behold, it's now 100. You know it's working. We probably ought to do more of that with opiates. In other words, you can prove that a person who's taken more milligrams by mouth is not really getting the effects of more milligrams that most people believe is the case. Tolerance, a normal thing. Increase medicines, yes, but it's not increasing the blood level. If the claim is that if you take all these medicines and you become addicted, you have to assume that addiction occurs at a certain blood level. And that is not true. In fact, opiate addiction, we are pretty sure with our research, is more genetic than environmental. And we've talked to 50 people with heroin disease, and all of them went to the moon and had intense euphoria on the very first pill. That's a system of genetic triggering. It's kind of like another disease we have called G6PD that's genetically related. And if you eat a fava bean, it causes your blood to destroy itself. A triggered genetic disease. And we're pretty sure that's what opiate addiction is. And of course, it's nice because if you're of the 995 people out of 1,000 that will never become addicted, as soon as you have an opiate, then nobody needs to ever worry again. You'll never become addicted. So that's the story on tolerance, and I'm going to leave you at this point with 10 minutes and tell you that I got some new flowers. Guess what plant this is from? These are poppies.